John Harbaugh doubled down on his offensive line decisions after a brutal Week 2 loss to the Las Vegas Raiders. We talk about that. Lamar Jackson somehow taking heat for the loss, what needs to change, and so much more coming up next year on this edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you as always on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available for you, all podcasting platforms. Video form on YouTube, you can like and subscribe to the channel. Audio form, you can follow along and subscribe as well for 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage plus more. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We have former Baltimore Ravens wide receiver and Super Bowl champion Qadry Ismail back with us. Q, tough start to the Ravens season, 0-2, first time since 2015 they have had that record, and obviously the big one here on Sunday, Baltimore losing 26-23 to Las Vegas. Heartbreaking fashion for multiple different reasons, but certainly not the start most of us expected for this squad.
You know, it's interesting when you look at this season and what John Harbaugh, described in his presser earlier this week was the fact that he was saying they're inconsistent and they're wildly inconsistent. Talking about the offensive line, but I think as a team, we're seeing these big waves of up and downness, and it's reminiscent of those fourth quarter meltdowns that we saw 2 years ago. And I just think that to be a good team, you can't have inconsistencies. To be a good team, you have to beat teams that you're supposed to beat. And the Raiders were a team that you were supposed to beat. You were clearing away the better team, and you let one slip away.
Yeah, just brutal. And you're right. It does kind of remind you of what we have seen over the past couple of years for John Harbaugh. And there are certainly many stats that back that up, especially one over the last 5 seasons. The Ravens have 10-plus losses, or I guess just 10 losses with a 7-plus point lead in the fourth quarter. That's the most in the NFL over the course of that span. So a lot to dive into today, and we're going to have actually, again, just a maintenance reminder. We now have graphics supporting the show. So it's a way to kind of make this thing a little bit more show-feely like on the video side. Obviously, audio, we're still going to be talking over them. Don't worry.
We're fancy. We're fancy.
Exactly. We're getting fancy with the spices. That's exactly right here. So we're going to be talking about all of that and getting into, again, quotes, stats, and all the 9 yards there. But Q, the offensive line, you mentioned it, such a big conversation point for this team. They lose 3 starters. We talked about it all offseason, although I know for you, we're not talking offseason anymore. We are now in the real deal, the real thing.
Real deal.
And John Harbaugh was asked because, look, we can be honest. The offensive line had some pretty poor play on Sunday. Max Crosby wreaking havoc, particularly a lot of the ire coming from the 3 guys that were replacing the departed veterans. John Harbaugh was asked about a couple of them, Andrew Voorhees and Daniel Falele, and ended up saying that they have seen progress out of those guys, but big picture is not necessarily overly measurable. Said that when you put a young group of guys out there, of course, there are going to be growing pains, especially on the offensive line. He called them inconsistent, like you talked about. Your evaluation of what this offensive line is and this group is based off of John Harbaugh's comments. What do you got on that?
I just think when you look at the offensive line and you look at them being 0-2, there's a direct correlation. They have not played well at all. I don't know where to start. Obviously, it's McCurry, it's Falele, it's Rosengarten, it's Voorhees. At times, it seems like there's just one guy doing it, and it comes at the wrong time. It's a communication era. It's something that literally, when you look at this group, you just stop and you shake your head and you wonder what is going on, and it's just really disappointing.
It is. And I think that everybody expected there to be growing pains, but here's the difference, Q, between what's going on in growing pains. We are certainly seeing them, but you're right. It's a direct correlation to their record. It is actively costing them games. And I find it, I don't know what the word I would want to use is here, but this is a team that's experimenting right now. Daniel Falele is not a natural guard, and essentially they believe in his skills and his ability to go put him out there and say, can Daniel Falele do this at a consistent level? But we know, Q, in this offense, if you want to be a member of the starting offensive line, if you want to be an effective member, you have to be able to get to your spots, get out into space, pull effectively. And Falele, when he's trying to do that, he doesn't get to his spots quickly enough. We saw that on a couple of plays on Sunday against Las Vegas. It just feels like his skill set, he's a huge dude. He's massive. But them playing him at guard and trying this experiment for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations and is contending, it would have made sense if he had shown a lot during the preseason. And he had a flawless preseason record. But even then, he was kind of going through ups and downs. And now we're seeing, hey, these aren't preseason games anymore. These aren't, second, third string guys. This is Chris Jones. This is Max Crosby. It's a whole different ball game. And it is, you're exactly right, actively going against what they need to do and costing them ball games.
Micah Parsons, Trey Hendrickson, they're all coming up. They are all coming up. So if you think that, okay, well, we got all the tough ones out the way. No, we did not. We just got previews of what's to come. This is a team that you make it to the first number one seed. I shouldn't say first seed, but you make it to the number one seed. Now you're the guy. You get the first round bye. Well, the next year, the NFL wants to create parity. They like parity. They think that if everybody has parity, then everybody, fan base wise, is going to spend money because they don't think their team is going to win. And so now you got a first place scheduled team. And so, or first place scheduled period, because you're a first place scheduled team. You haven't shown yourself from an offensive line standpoint that you have that capability of being a first place dominant team on the offensive line. And we're seeing that, at 0-2, and the statistics are showing that it doesn't look good when you're trying to get back to the playoffs when you have this demanding schedule. I think this is something where if it doesn't get fixed, and you'll say, well, how does it get fixed? Well, I mean, do you Tyler Linderbaum, favor his side more? But what happens if Tyler has a zero technique or a two technique over him and he has to handle it? There's not going to be that slide protection over to Falele's side. And again, McCurry, Max Crosby just straight bull rushed and spent speed to power and got to Lamar quick on him. You do an ET stunt or a TE stunt, and Max again just aces it, gets around the corner and gets to the quarterback, and you just see Daniel's just not able to get into the hole and get his big paws on him. There are times where you can see that they do it, and then there's times where it's like, oh my God, you messed up at the wrong time. And that's something that my God, man, you gotta figure out quickly, or else this season will be a loss in a hurry.
Yeah, they have to, because again, you're staring down an 0-2 start right now. 0-3 is a whole different animal.
Oh boy.
Whole different animal. And it's tough, especially because you mentioned it right there, Q, and I agree with you. That first place schedule is no joke. We look at Cincinnati's schedule. They're 0-2, just like Baltimore, but they have a little bit of that cushier schedule coming up, where the Ravens, there are no days off. There are no days off for the Ravens in terms of competitive opponents here. But when talking about Falele, we also saw there was a rep him against the defensive back. And the defensive back, it was just a one-on-one. And the defensive back juked out Falele, and Lamar ended up getting, it was no harm, no foul, but Falele's lunging forward. He's putting his hands out. He's in a bad position. It's just like it's rep after rep after rep of that. Him being too slow, shuffling his feet. It's all of that. And so naturally, you would say, well, they have a guard on the roster in Ben Cleveland, who they drafted. He's a fourth-year guy. Well, John Harbaugh was asked about Ben Cleveland and Daniel Falele and kind of that, okay, who's going to start? What do you make to determine that? And John Harbaugh did not necessarily mince words when talking about Ben Cleveland. Say, that he loved Ben and that, he, all this different stuff. But in reality, here's the quote. If Ben had earned that job, he'd be the starting right guard. You look at the tape, he didn't beat out Daniel. Ben knows what he needs to do if he wants playing time. Our evaluation right now is that Daniel outplayed Ben, just facts, straight up. And again, went into a couple of other different details on the matter. But the reality of this situation, Q, is that I don't know what putting Ben Cleveland in would not do at this point. I mean, I think that it has to be somewhat better than what you're seeing. And Sarah Ellison, shout out to Sarah, put together some stats. Ben Cleveland in 2023, week 17 and week 18, run blocking grade of 63.6 and 90.9, pass blocking grades of 86.8 and 79.6. Daniel Falele in 2024, first 2 weeks of the season, 55 and 50 run blocking grade, 66.8 and 58.5 pass blocking grade. So you saw that's Ben Cleveland at the end of last season versus Daniel Falele this season. John Harbaugh did not mince words here when talking about Ben Cleveland. I thought this answer was honestly a little shocking, almost with how honest he was about it. Not that Harbaugh isn't necessarily, he's this liar 24/7. I'm not saying that, but I think we kind of got a peek behind the curtain of what John Harbaugh really feels about Ben Cleveland right here.
I think if you look at John Harbaugh, his mindset has never been to throw guys necessarily under the bus and always kind of like have a positive spin on it. This was like an indictment against Ben Cleveland. This was, no, he ain't playing. He ain't going to ever play until he gets better. And he's not good enough. But yet he did play last year in real football games and produced. And Sarah Ellison, as you just said, pointed it out. So in training camp, was it that dramatic of a step back? And the times that I was in training camp, you saw, some spots where it's like, yeah, okay. But it wasn't that dramatic. Clearly, they know the scheme. Clearly, they're seeing way more than we're ever going to be able to see and be let on to seeing. Somehow, some way, it is official. Ben Cleveland is in John Harbaugh's doghouse. Period. End of discussion.
And I honestly think
Perry needs to be the guy then to go over to guard and then put Roger Rosengarten at tackle. That seems like the only other logical solution.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was going to say that, it honestly feels like, and I don't have any necessarily basis off of this, but is this just like Ben Cleveland rubbed John Harbaugh the wrong way in some way of like maybe he didn't practice as hard? And we know John Harbaugh, he's a high effort guy. Did Ben Cleveland not show it in practice? Because in this answer, John Harbaugh said, he knows how he has to practice. And so is that kind of pulling the curtain back a little bit and saying, well, maybe he's not playing as hard in practice as Falele is. And so he's given the opportunity if there's not that much drop off between the two, according to his eyes. But I think we all kind of see it, Q, is that something needs to change or else Lamar Jackson, I'm worried about Lamar here. I mean, it's just a matter of like protecting him, opening these rushing lanes. And honestly, there are so many other things to talk about too with this offensive line. So coming up with the second part of the show, we are going to be diving a bit more into that right tackle spot, Q, as you mentioned, plus getting into a John Harbaugh quote that has people very riled up, and Lamar Jackson somehow, some way taking heat for the loss. Stay tuned. Plenty to talk about on the show. First, the show is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools that provide the right professionals for your team faster and for free. So for me, I've had a ton of great experiences over on LinkedIn, whether it's networking, connecting, finding jobs. LinkedIn has it all. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job. might be open to the perfect role in a given month. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn and looking in the wrong place on LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses are going to qualify candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like professional on LinkedIn. Push a job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to push a job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And the show is brought to you by Gametime. I love going to live events, really no matter what kind, sports, music, theater, comedy. I've attended them all, and I love making new memories and trying to make a couple new memories with those each year. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks. It makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Plus, Gametime had a great 50% off Labor Day sale for Diamondbacks and Dodgers. So the Ravens obviously will be traveling to Dallas, but that Buffalo game, they'll be back in Baltimore for a primetime action. Be sure to check out Gametime. They have super deals and other tiers of deals to look out for. Plus, the app has so many features. Gametime Picks, they have all-in pricing, which you have to have on to use the all-in pricing feature. Seat views, lowest price guarantee, Gametime ticket covers, and so much more. Plus, the app is super easy to use and navigate. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account. Use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, spelled LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. We are back. Our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher and Qadry Ismail still talking with you here on this Taco Tuesday. I appreciate everybody for checking in today, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day, your first listen each and every day. Again, we're just starting up with the graphics situation here on the show. Actually, first show yesterday with graphics, highest viewed episode in Locked On Ravens history. Highest viewed episode ever since doing the YouTube. And obviously, you can talk, Q. I think a lot of that had to do with the passion of the fan base when it came to John Harbaugh. Obviously, Zay Flowers took to social media last night and reposted something, so that was a big thing. But hey, you know what? I love the passion, and we're in it just like everybody else is watching this thing and making sure that hopefully this team can be the best that they can be. So we're going to keep going here on Locked On Ravens, 5 days a week of Ravens content. But Q, Roger Rosengarten, I thought he showed me something on Sunday. I thought you saw Patrick McCary struggling against Max Crosby early. Roger Rosengarten comes in, and hey, Stonewall's won a couple of possessions. And I thought, hey, that's really good. Maybe starting to see him come into his own. But then it's this rotation cue that I can't get over it. Where I want to take you back to your playing days here. So when you were a rookie and you were kind of getting acclimated to the league, and when you had opportunities and you thought you did something well, and you're like, all right, hey, I'm starting to feel this out, starting to build momentum, whatever situation it was, whatever it may be. And you're starting to find momentum. And then all of a sudden, if a coach came up to you and said, all right, now get back to the bench. We're putting somebody else in. If you felt like you had that momentum, I mean, how would you feel in that situation? Because to me, it's just like, it feels like he's establishing momentum, and then he's getting yanked for doing nothing wrong. And then he's getting put back in. Then he's getting yanked for doing nothing wrong. I mean, for you and your perspective, what does that kind of do, and what message does it send?
It's interesting because I think young players, and every young player is different, and every role is different. For an example, first-round draft choice, Malik Neighbors. He's playing for the Giants, wide receiver. He's a very dynamic guy. Was targeted some 12 times, I believe, and caught like 10 balls. But the one ball, 4th and 4, critical situation, he catches that. The Giants pretty much is going to win the game. Well, they go ahead, throw it to him on a scramble, Daniel Jones, and right on the sideline. It's such a catchable ball. And he, boom, goes right through him, hits off on his chest, and he drops it. Those are scenarios where that's a significant growing pain after just crushing it all day, and you have that growing pain. Other first rounders, whether it be the quarterback down in Carolina, like literally Bryce Young has been like anointed like Carolina's guy, the whole 9 yards. And now after 18 games, he's getting benched. I know every guy reacts to adversity differently, and every organization has their own plan on how to utilize those young players in-game situations to help them with their psyche, but also help the team win and develop. And I think for the Ravens, they just feel like somehow, some way, if we bring him along, but we rotate him in and let his feet get wet, that's going to be enough. That's going to be good. I am starting to wonder, like, okay, why don't we just go ahead and just play him? Like, don't even worry about it anymore and let him be. I think that's something where it needs to happen and take place, as opposed to this rotation where you're trying to figure, well, we're saving him. Like, at 0-2, desperate times calls for desperate measures.
It's true. It absolutely does. And John Harbaugh pretty much doubled down on the rotation aspect, saying that it's possible that Roger Rosengarten is able to, be stuck with at the right tackle position. But, Harbaugh also said that Patrick McCarry's playing well and said that they're going to keep working both of those guys in there. So I'm not necessarily anticipating a full-time Roger Rosengarten in these next couple of weeks. So we'll end up seeing what happens. But we talked about those fourth quarter blown leads earlier. And John Harbaugh has asked about that and said, they have to be better in those situations. They have to win those games. He wants to win those games. Everybody wants to win those games. But the quote that's getting everybody up in arms right now is John Harbaugh essentially said, and this is what he said, word for word, the fact that you have so many leads in the fourth quarter probably lends itself to you're going to lose more leads than most teams. So, look, great that you have the fourth quarter leads, like, congratulations. But, I'm not taking any solace in the fact that they lose those games. Be up in the fourth quarter, fine, but close the game. I'm not really buying this one, Q. I think, to me, he had a bunch of other different answers, but I think this is what I've seen on social media the most, of people taking this quote and saying, well, who cares if you have the fourth quarter leads? Just finish the game. People don't care that you got the lead. People care that you hold it. People care that you win the game. And that's what has people upset right now.
I think the one thing with this quote, I think he's trying to have a almost perfect response. I'm frustrated with it because I look at Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, like those are quarterbacks and coaches. Sean Payton, Peyton Manning having Tony Dungy and Bill Belichick, the GOAT. When you have those fourth quarter leads, you step up and you play and or coach to put yourself in position to not give up those leads, to not falter. And I think that's a coaching thing. Like, I really do. I think that's an attitude of like, we just close you out. Our way of doing things is designed to put you in so much pressure that when we get a lead, you just don't know what to do. And we take over, period, end of discussion. And that's where I'm like, that quote is, it's a little off-putting, I guess, like, I don't know. I think it's more along the lines of you got to learn how to finish games and you just haven't learned it. And that's pretty sad.
And I think we see it was like record book after record book thing here, where the Raiders had lost 49 straight games, trailing by 10 points or more entering the fourth quarter, or just not entering, but just in the fourth quarter in general. Well, I guess number 50 was the lucky charm for him against this Baltimore Ravens team, who you said, and you put it perfectly, Q, the Ravens are a better team than the Raiders. But the Raiders played like the better team on Sunday, and that is why Baltimore is not able to pull this game out. And we've seen this. We can go back to last year, Q. Some of those Ravens losses, Gardner Minshew last year, that Colts game, the Ravens were a better team than the Colts last year, but it was costly mistakes, miscommunications. That Steelers game, where they 7 drops in that game. It's just like this. And we heard Ronnie Stanley talk about it. Lamar Jackson talk about it. Mark Andrews talk about it. It just feels very self-inflicted, whether it be execution, whether it be coaching. A lot of it just feels like if they don't make 1 or 2 mistakes here, they're able to at least tie this game, if not pull the game out in general. But we talk about how John Harbaugh is to blame a lot in this game, the offensive line. I knew it was coming, Q. Somehow, some way, Lamar Jackson found his way into these conversations. Stephen A. Smith, the man himself on ESPN, said that he's putting a lot of this blame on Lamar Jackson. And he said that, isn't he the 2-time league MVP? How many fourth quarter leads are you going to lose? That's a legitimate question, that I think he needs to answer. I knew it was coming. Q doesn't make it any less ridiculous for me in terms of this. Lamar, does he want a couple throws back? Sure. There are a couple that you could say, oh yeah, he could maybe hit that one. But in no way, shape, or form am I putting this on Lamar Jackson. I think that for him, there are so many other things that went wrong in this game that were not Lamar Jackson to even think about including him in these conversations.
It's so weird because I do think Lamar, as polarizing as he is, I think it's irresponsible for Stephen A. just to flippantly throw it on Lamar. I think at the same time, we do recognize that Lamar needs to, in certain instances, make the throws that will, when given to him, he needs to make those throws, period. I think there's 1, 2 that I can recall in this game that one was to Nelson Aguilar, perfect man-to-man on the outside, and Nelly gets a clean release, goes down the field, and I believe it was the defensive back from Maryland.
Yep, Qadry Ismail.
Broke it up. And it was like, dang it, he had separation, and I wish Lamar would have been able to get it out there further. And then the other one was to Mark Andrews, where Mark made a great move to get open down the seam, and he overthrew him as well. And I think in both of those instances, like in my mind, I'm like, man, I go back to the Kansas City Chiefs game, and it was the same thing, whether it's, Isaiah Likely in a corner, whether it's Bateman going down the middle of the field with looking like zero coverage. Like, those are throws where, yes, he has to be held accountable for. But the Raiders game in particular and the statement that was made, I mean, that's not on Lamar. Lamar's not playing defense, and he's not, the referee as far as throwing, 2 pass interference calls that you're like, man, Marlon was in good position. I don't get that one. Man, Brandon Stevens, like, they were both kind of jostling one another, and Brandon, like, played the coverage perfectly. Like, those are things where I'm confused with when it comes to Stephen A. and his comments.
Yeah, and I think that there's another conversation to be had within this conversation, so I want to bring this up to you in the final part of the show about the play calling in particular. So stay tuned. Still lots to get to on Locked On Ravens. Q and I'll be breaking it all down coming up next. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, and I love going on FanDuel, seeing all that they have to offer. We have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and a 3-week free trial if anyone sends a ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base band, we'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon on a market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel anytime. So for the Ravens and Raiders game, if you picked the Raiders to win that game, you're probably living large on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com, download America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to Locked On Ravens. We are here on Tuesday. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you. And of course, Qadry Ismail still alongside me talking Ravens football. If you want 5 days per week of Ravens coverage plus more, we do live shows after every single Ravens game. We have pregame episodes now. Again, we're trying to make the show better. We're adding the graphic element in. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. Hit that follow button. Subscribe over in audio form as well. If you have a friend or a family member who's a Ravens fan, wants Ravens coverage, be sure to send them our way over here on Locked On Ravens. Now, Q, with Lamar Jackson, I feel like it's so tough for him right now because the offensive line is giving him not really a lot right now. Some of the play calling has been a little suspect. To me personally, Q, Todd Monken has left a little to be desired, in my opinion, on some of these plays. I just feel like we see them find success with the run game late in that game. Derrick Henry starts cooking, and then things kind of go one way, and they almost try to abandon it in a way and trying to get all cute with stuff. And I don't know. To me, Monken has left a little to be desired for me, and I think that does have an impact. And look, with head coaches, with quarterbacks, there will always be some level of blame that just naturally falls onto them. With Lamar Jackson, it's clearly in a lot of instances a lot more than the average quarterback, just based off of a bunch of underlying factors. But do you feel like this Todd Monken offense through 2 weeks is where you expected it to be, or do you think that there is still a lot to be desired with what he has to call right now?
I think the offensive rhythm has not been what I was hoping for. The offensive rhythm when it comes to the run pass ratio, the types of runs, taking advantage of what the defense is giving you, making adjustments when it comes to what the defense is really like taking away from your offense. Okay, here's a counterpunch to it. Different personnel packages. As much as it's cute to look on film and say, well, we got Mark Andrews and we got Isaiah Likely, and then there's Zay Flowers and Rashod Bateman. Oh, Derrick Henry in the backfield with Lamar, and we can label all those things, but execution, it comes down to, okay, the defense is going to play their defense. What are we doing to stop them when they are coming at us with something that's working? What's our counterpunch? And that's what I always thought Greg Roman lacked. And that's what I thought this year's iteration of the Ravens offense was going to have, just such a supreme counterpunch that it wasn't going to be where it was like, and you're kind of like, pause. I'm scratching my head as to some of the ways in which they're running the offense, and I'm hoping that they get into a better rhythm of play calling and personnel packages. I thought we saw a little bit of that in the third quarter with the way they ran the ball, and you can even see the enthusiasm, say, of Ronnie Stanley when Derrick Henry is finishing off the run. He's like going up to him, and they're like helmet to helmet, really just looking at each other like, yo, let's do this. So I don't know. I think that there's room to grow, but you better figure it out quickly. Week 3, you just can't be 0-3. If you're trying to even think about being next level, you better start, and it's going to be a tough test because you're going down to Big D, and they're coming off a thumping. So this is if there's ever people are always like, oh, there's no such thing as a must win because every game. No, this is must win. This is do or die, and you're staring at the abyss, and it's staring right back at you.
Every dayers, Q. You know my saying here: September losses don't matter in September; they do matter in December. And I think when you start getting into 0-3, September losses do start to matter in September. So I think that's kind of where that is. But again, for Lamar, it's like the interception, it bounces off of Rashod Bateman's hands. The offensive line is not giving him time to go through his progressions. There's all this stuff. Could Lamar have had a couple of throws back? Sure. I'm not saying he was perfect in the game. But I just think there are so many other things. One of the biggest ones, and I'll bring this graphic back up from yesterday, the challenges, Q. The challenges for John Harbaugh. He goes 0-2 on challenges. Obviously, you lose 2 timeouts. There are the new rules with the challenges now where you actually have 2 opportunities to win a challenge and a third one in the game. He does not hit on either of them. Plays that, at least in my opinion, were pretty clear and conclusive, even just on replay. Zay Flowers, that ball hits the turf, bouncing up back to him. I get that, the crowd and Zay was clamoring for him to challenge it. He did it anyway. But the big one, Q, was Devontae Adams. That ball, possession 2 feet down, hands under the ball. Harbaugh challenges it. He loses the timeout in the second half and costs them big late because you're talking about, the Raiders walking down the Ravens late to get that go-ahead field goal. And all of a sudden, the Ravens get the ball back with 27 seconds left instead of 1 minute and 7 seconds left, where that's a lot more time for Lamar Jackson and company to operate. So when talking about, doesn't Lamar get the ball back too for Stephen A? Well, guess what? Lamar didn't have as much time to work with because his coach messed up the challenges, and that was a big factor in it. So we've seen this with John Harbaugh, Q. The challenge in his career has not necessarily been a strong suit of his. I mean, can you kind of walk through what you saw in those two plays and kind of how you thought it impacted the game?
Yeah, I mean, I can see where the Zay Flowers one. I think sometimes what happens, John, senses the, hey, I want to support my guys, make them like, yeah, you challenge it because you believe that I did it. Yeah, kind of like that bonding. It's going to pay dividends later in the game when, it's a critical moment. I just think, especially at home, the vision board and the way in which, like, the guys replay it so quickly to get the play up for John, I would have been like, yeah, there's some question there. I know it was right on the Ravens sideline. He kind of had a up close and personal look with it. I mean, I see that one maybe. But the second challenge, I wouldn't have touched that one. I would have been like, nah, live and fight another day. Yeah, that was questionable, but, that's Devontae Adams. I've seen him make those plays. Let's leave a sleeping dog lie. I think he needed to be a little bit more judicious on that one. I think he got caught up in emotions on both of them, and it turned out to hurt him in the long run.
Yeah, it definitely did. I mean, it was critical. They had another timeout in that late game situation, and they didn't have it. And that's on the game management and kind of how this game went for the Ravens. And so just a general game recap here, Q, obviously is getting your thoughts on the game in general. I mean, look, the big discrepancy here, both teams didn't do really well on third down. 4 of 12 for Las Vegas, 3 of 11 for the Ravens. But those penalties, man, 11 for 109 for the Ravens. Some ones that were actual penalties, like the Derrick Henry false starts, those are not disputable. Some other ones, maybe not so much. A Chris Board phantom unnecessary roughness. Nnamdi Madubuike phantom face mask. Questionable PI on Brandon Stevens, which you could argue both ways. But the Raiders, look, credit to them. They didn't make mistakes. The Ravens did. Now, some self-inflicted, some. Look, that referee crew on Sunday was one of the worst I think we've seen for this team in a while. But it directly impacts the game. And I look at the AFC North standings, and you see the Ravens now tied for third with the Bengals at 0-2. Both those teams trying to climb out of that hole. The Steelers have 1 touchdown this season, or an 2-0 because of that. And then the Browns are at 1-1. So for you moving forward, Q, what's your overall outlook, and what do you think needs to fully change for this team to get back on track?
Well, I definitely know those penalties in that graphic was just appalling. 100 yards is 100 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just you're climbing in, out of a hole that you just dirt's just coming right back in it every time you think you got, up close to daylight. I think just the shockiness of the special teams play, the shockingness of the secondary as far as giving up so many yards after completely just dominating the first half. I'm at a loss for words, and
yeah,
because you just know that was a game you're supposed to win. It's just plain and simple. When you look at the way in which this team was built and designed, you're supposed to have an Odafe Owe type of a coming out party, and him just, doing his Max Crosby impersonation on the first drive as well, and the strip sack. And, you're supposed to see Nnamdi Madubuike be a dominant force and, being a disruptor. You're supposed to, but instead we're talking about a L that has everything to do with staring down last place in your division, and the NFC or the AFC North it's ugly right now. I mean, both, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Cleveland is Cleveland, but even Pittsburgh isn't really looking all that stout. I think collectively it's ugly right now, and it needs to, from a Ravens standpoint, for even fan base standpoint, certainly needs to change. And there's nothing better than going on the road against a team that, they got talent, but this is a great test. It's a great test because you can stop the run. It's a great test because here we go. And now all of a sudden, you're having Dak Prescott throwing the ball down the football field, and you're going to have CeeDee Lamb and, Cooks and all the things. So there's a lot of talent over there that you're going to be looking at. I think this is a great test to shut up the naysayers and at least get one in the win column.
Yeah, look, I'm not saying the season's over, Q, but they have some serious things they need to look in the mirror about and figure out very soon. Because, again, you look at that 0-3 hole, and that is just that's a deep one. That's a deep one to have to climb out of. So, again, offensive line, they have to figure it out. I don't know how you can keep rolling out the same group, but feels like they will do it. And like you said, Q, it's not like you say, oh, Chris Jones is gone, Max Crosby's gone, we're in the free. Nope. You got a lot of talented fast rushers coming, including, you mentioned him, Micah Parsons of that Dallas Cowboys team. But Q, I appreciate you. Thanks so much, as always, for hopping on and talking Ravens football. Tell people, as always, where they can find you and what you're working on.
Yeah, man, it is all about missiletraining.com. Missiletraining.com is where you can find me to dialogue and talk about your fitness needs when it comes to sports and human movement performance. At the same time, you can also see me on WJZ every Sunday for Purple Pregame, starting at 11 on your devices, whatever you want to see. Purple Pregame show also on WJZ CBS. And at the same time, it's Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher and I, every single week, we breaking it all down here. Come join us, dialogue with us. I promise you, you're going to love it. And of course, the Ryan Ripken Show. We're over on that platform as well. All your podcast needs and listening as far as Ravens talk, breaking down film of what we saw with the Ravens games, and also looking ahead. That's on Tuesdays as well as Fridays. Check us out.
Yeah, Q's a busy man. You heard it here first. Go check him out. All that he has to be doing here for this Ravens team does a great job breaking it all down. And of course, for sports performance as well. All the links to Q's work in the description down below. Q, appreciate you as always, and appreciate everybody for tuning in, watching, listening to Locked On Ravens today. Be sure to, again, on the way out, hit that like and subscribe button. Really helps out the show. Almost to 8,000 subscribers. We're hitting a really awesome patch here, so appreciate all the support. Coming up tomorrow, of course, we'll be breaking down more Ravens, so stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.